Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Chris and I'm a real-world flying instructor with over 2,000 hours experience on piston, turbofan and jet aircraft, including the aircraft you see in front of you here. This is the Just Flight Hawk T1A released from Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm loaded up at Condensed airfield, which is south of RAF Valley in Wales. I chose this airfield over RAF Valley itself, the home of the Hawk, because it's custom scenery by Orbex and it looks really nice. This video is going to be focusing on cold and dark startup. The checks themselves are not going to be per the flight reference cards or what's put in the Just Flight manual, but it'll be a combination of both. The reason for this is I want to be able to enjoy this aircraft without having to spend too much time on checking each individual switch that's not necessarily required. First of all, when you approach the aircraft, you'll want to get into the rear cockpit. The way you can do that, you can assign a hotkey to it. By hotkey, I mean a HOTAS key, or select camera, pilot, co-pilot. Now that in the rear seat, the two switches you have to make are the engine start switch to on and the anti-skid to on. Then you can jump back in the front seat. Now in here, if you want, you can give a left to right check to make sure everything is in the down, off or safe position, apart from of course the flaps. That's not essential because it starts as is by default. Now that we're in, we can select the oxygen switch to on, the rudder pedals to unlock, the batteries on, cancel the warning. Then you're going to confirm the parking brake is on, which is down here. That is on. And I'm going to switch my nav light on to let people know that the aircraft is manned. Internal checks. The LP cock is located on the left hand side. It needs to be down, which is the on position. Then the fuel pump selected to on. You can set avionics up as you require at this stage. I'm just going to switch the radio on and preset channel 2. Maybe that's my ground frequency. Prior to start, you close the canopy, but you don't need to lock it. Now we're ready to start. So I've told air traffic I've got clearance to start, and I've told the crew chief, and he's ready. Put two anti-collision lights to red strobe. Put the engine start switch to on. And press the start relight button on the throttle. You'll instantly hear the GTS start to spool up. That's the gas turbine starter system. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it provides air to rotate the engine for the engine start. It'll take 20 seconds and then the green blinker will illuminate here. Now that I have green on my GTS, I can reach down and carefully select the engine start switch to on. At this stage, you'll see the RPM start to increase and the rotation go green. We're waiting until this reaches 15 to 20%, and then we're going to select the throttle to idle by clicking the base. This opens the HP cock, which allows fuel to flow into the engine, and you can see the RPM start to increase. If you click the base of the throttle again, it'll go to HP shut off, and you'll abort the start. The rest of the start sequence is just a case of monitoring to make sure the TGT doesn't overtemp. At 45% RPM, the rotation and the GTS indicators will go black, and at 52% RPM, the engine start cycle will be complete. You can hear the GTS has shut down, and the engine has successfully started. The HIDE 2 caption remains illuminated. We can reset the HIDE 2 system by pressing here. You see the high pressure increasing and the HIDE 2 caption goes out. The CWP is clear apart from the skid, and that's the start cycle complete. After start, we can check the trims are in neutral. The air brake can be tested by making this switch to the forward position, checking the air brake, and then putting the switch back to the aft position. The pitot can go on, or pitot heat should I say. The flaps can be selected to mid with the indicator here, and the canopy can be locked with the arrows in line. We can select the AHRs, I believe it is, to slave, and that'll start the ADI and the HSI synchronizing and erecting. Whilst I remember, I'm going to set my altimeter to the QFE, which is 0, so that when I touch down on the runway, my altimeter does read 0. I'll also set the course bar to 02, because that is the runway I'm taking off on. At this stage we're ready to taxi. I'll select the taxi light to on, the parking brake to off. Before I set that, I better remove these steps using the iPad on the seat. And now we're good to go. Parking brake off, power on. And off to the runway. Okay, doing taxi checks whilst moving is always a risk, especially in a sim, but let's give it a go. So the trims we've checked are correct. The pitot is on, the fuel is sufficient, and the battery, correction, the pump was on. The flaps are in the mid position. The lights are where I want them to be, nav on, anti-colds red, and the taxi landing light on. Anti-skid. We can select on, and you'll see the anti-skid light goes out. If that doesn't, it means you haven't made the switch in the rear cockpit. At this point, it's normal for an emergency takeoff brief. I'll just focus on this car, make sure it doesn't hit me. Stay there. Thank you. So prior to takeoff, we've been cleared takeoff. We'll make sure that our squawk, our transponder is set. I'm not playing with that today. I might do another video on it later, but the transponder is set. The lights are on, so I'm going to put the click spot's quite small for this. But the anticols are white, the nav light's on, the landing light's on. I'll start my lineup now. The mass, if we had weapons, that can go to live. WCP, checking the weapons. And we'll move on to the runway. I'll select full power. The brakes are holding. The RPM should be a maximum of 104 and the TGT a maximum of 665. Engines are good. Brakes release. Looking for 90 knots. Rotate. Hold the nose up. 120 knots. Airborne. Gear. Flat. Hold this attitude. There's no real need to trim until you get to 200 knots, when the trim is now set correctly, and you can adjust as you require as you climb away, aiming for 300 knots. And here we go, set up quite nicely. I can calculate my threshold speed by adding 1 knot per 100 kilos to 110. So 500 kilos, that's in a threshold speed of 115. Okay, here we go. Clearing the pattern, idle, roll, speed brake, some light buffet. Looking for 200 knots downwind. Speed brake comes in. I'll use the rest of the turn to bleed the speed off to 200. Checking the runway, checking my course bar. No wind, so I don't need to account for it. Speed below 200 knots, air brake is in, gear selected, mid flap selected. Threshold speed is calculated. Looking for 150 knots, about 87 to 89% RPM. About 45 degrees, I'm going to select flap to down, few degrees nose down, power stable, and holding that 140 knots around the turn. About 750 feet halfway round, keeping the turn coming. I want to be about 300 feet by the time I roll out. I'll start slowing the speed to achieve about 130 knots. A little bit slow, power on. Glide path is good, trimming, and starting to slow down towards my threshold speed. Gear is down, flap is down. Looking towards the end of the runway, bringing the power back to idle, flaring the aircraft and looking to land within 1,000 feet of the approach threshold. Lower the nose and apply brakes. This aircraft slows quicker on brakes than it does via aero braking. And we've made it. Success. You can see I've selected my flaps up. I'm going to bring it to a stop here to save the embarrassment of me accidentally taxiing off the runway whilst I'm doing the rest of the checks. For the after landing checks, the mask can go to safe, the pitot heat can switch off, anti-skid can be switched off, and cancel the warning for the caption. Other than that, you're checking all weapons off and safe. Flaps are put to up. CWP you can test by clicking to open, toggle the switch, and then shut the guard. CWP checks OK. Lights can go as required. We can set them to red carefully for the taxi back. And what else have we got? ILS, IFF, as in the squawk, the transponder I mean, and the TACAN can all go off if you switch them on. And then we taxi back to our parking spot. Here we are, back at our parking slot. Now I'll complete the rest of the shutdown. Parking brake is confirmed as on. Engine start switch can go to off. Fuel pump off. HP cock off. Click on the base. RPM's reducing. Open the canopy. Everything else at this stage can be switched off. And the batteries. So if you're still with me, thank you very much for sticking around. I hope you found it useful. Please hit that like button if it is useful, and even better, hit the subscribe and stay up to date with my latest videos. If you've got any comments, please feel free to stick them in the comment section below. If you've got any questions, please put those in as well. I'm happy to answer them. And like I said, I'll put links to the product in the description below, and also to the quick guide to starting up that I've been using in this video. But until the next time, happy flying and take care.